good morning, or whatever time it is that you're watching this. All right, so I am going to just invite you to walk through some art with me today. So my husband made this contraption over here. You can kind of see it. On our very messy kitchen table. There's still somebody's breakfast there. So that I can set my phone up and you guys can basically just see the table as I'm working. So whether you have supplies with you right now or you just want to walk through and then like do your own thing later, I'm just going to invite you to play along with me with this. All right, so welcome to my kitchen table. And I just gotta be honest, this is just super awkward for me. I have not done anything like this before, ever, like on video. So yeah, just give me lots of grace and yeah, so we're gonna dive in. But all right, so when I am doing art as like a worship experience, I think I mentioned in my other video, it often comes out of like what God is teaching me lately about Him, about me in Him, about whatever He's doing in my heart. And so that often, not always, but often starts with something He's teaching me in His Word. So I'm just going to share with you guys real quick some verses that have been on my mind lately as I thought about what to do for this. So Isaiah, by the way, I am not a Bible scholar whatsoever, at all. Did not go to Bible college. Yeah. So but Isaiah, very, very prophetic book. And we're going to be in Isaiah 49. If you want to grab your Bible, pause me and grab your Bible, or just listen. Then it's so full of hints towards the Messiah, towards Jesus. And I would encourage you to just go through and read it all on your own, Isaiah 49. I think it's beautiful. But there's a little passage in here that I will read out loud to you. So we're going to be in Isaiah 49, verse 14, starting in verse 14. It says, "But Zion said, 'The Lord has forsaken me. The Lord has forgotten me.' Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are ever before me." So that is verses 14 through 16. And particularly that verse 16, just maybe it's because I'm a visual person. I think that God must have known that there's some of us who think in pictures. And so like He gives us this really vivid picture. I have engraved you on the palms of my hand. If we back up, God, like, I don't know if you guys have ever felt like God has forgotten you or forsaken you. I have. Yeah. And then I would worry, like, oh gosh, like I feel like God has forsaken me. He's going to be so upset with me that I worry that He's forgotten me. I don't know, all sorts of crazy thoughts. But He has such compassion here, like he knows that His people will sometimes feel forgotten by Him. And He doesn't just like, oh, shame on you, like He says, like, no, He gives assurance. I will not forget you. I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. And I read something recently that highlighted that it's not just that He says, oh, I'll engrave your name on my hand. Like, I don't know if in school, I know when I was in school, this was a big thing. We'd write things on our hands, right, to remember them. We'd write people's names. Maybe somebody would write their phone number, It's not just our name, It's not just our number. God has written us. He says, I have engraved you. It's our identity, like all of us. And it's not easy to forget something written on your hand. It's right there with you, right? So I'm going to jump ahead to the New Testament, to John 20, verse 27. And this is when, after Jesus has risen, and he had been appearing to his disciples, but Thomas had not seen him yet. And the other disciples were telling him, like, oh, Jesus has risen. And he says in verse 25, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. So again, like I see here, Thomas I'm assuming he's scared, like he's doubtful. He's worried, like that it's not true. Maybe it's not true that his Lord and his teacher has risen back to life. And I don't see any shame here from God. He just, he says, peace be with you. And he offers the reassurance that Thomas needed, right? So these verses are on my mind, and the connection seems obvious to me. In the Old Testament, God says, I have written you on the palms of my hands. And here we see in the New Testament, like he literally did that. It's not just a nice sentiment, it's the truth. So I would actually, encourage you to go back and listen, if you haven't already, to Jeff's video about surrender and the sculpture that he is showing you guys how to make. And because when God engraved us on his hands, right, he was taking those things. He was taking our sin. He's taking our shame. And so, like, when Jeff was talking about, like, surrender, like, I'm reminding myself, too, how much I need to surrender, like, things like lies, and sin and habits in my life that I want to change. So for an art piece, there are several ideas that have been swimming around in my head for this. So I'm just going to kind of show you some ideas, and if one of them strikes you as something you want to do, then I hope that you try. I hope that you, gather whatever materials it is that you have available and do something with this, or with anything else that God's prompting you towards. So a very, very simple idea. I think we're going to have a printable available for you of a hand, basically. A very, very simple idea would just be to take this and just use it as like a jumping off point. You could color it in. I did one. I actually oriented my hand this way because I was imagining Jesus holding his hand out to me to show me his scars. But I did this with chalk pastels. This is just regular printer paper, guys, like nothing fancy. I had chalk pastels on hand, so I just colored this in with chalk pastels, and I have a couple verses on the corners. Another idea would be to just take this and so when I'm remembering that God does not forget me, he does not forget me even when I forget him, right? His faithfulness is not changed by my forgetfulness, which just amazes me. That just blows my mind. And so one thing I have not done it yet, but I've been thinking about doing is taking this paper and using the space outside of the hand as journaling space. I might write down just like things ways that God has been faithful to me. And that could be just like from his word, like how he is faithful to us, verses that bring you comfort and assurance of his love, like verses that show his character. It could be personal experiences, but just I could just imagine filling the space around the hand with just ways that I need to remember God's faithfulness, because we do forget. We forget so easily. And I think that's often where some of my fear stems from, is I become afraid of things because I get distracted, by other voices, not true ones. And so to me, an act of worship would be taking those fears captive and writing down the truth, how is God faithful to me? Yeah, I don't know. So that's just one example. If you're not a big writer, I mean, my goodness, you could doodle around the page. Yeah, there's really a lot of things that I think could be fun to do with this. So just in case you're curious about, I mentioned art journaling at one point in one of my videos. Just in case you're a little bit more curious about that, there are a couple of ways real quick that I can show you. This is actually, it's a visual journal that I got from Hobby Lobby. You can still see the sticker. I left the sticker on there. It was only $8.99. I don't know if that's the current price or anything, but it's never been much above that, I'm sure. You can also get them at if the stores were open, art and education store. You can find them online, whatever. It's just it's got mixed media paper that can hold up to a lot of things, paint and watercolor and whatnot. It's not as thick as watercolor, so you might not want to get it too wet. But and then another one, this is the one that I made this in. It's literally just an old book that what I did is I gessoed, I can show it, this is gesso on here. I gessoed several pages together to make a thicker surface, and then gessoed over it. If you don't know what gesso is, that's just this white paint that goes on canvas. But anyway, in case you're wanting to do something like that, I can give some more instructions if people are curious, but it's really simple. Just glue or gesso the pages together, let it dry, and then gesso the surface that you're wanting to work on. All right, so I am going to just play around with some stuff, and you guys are just sort of, I guess, along for the ride if you want to keep watching. So I'm actually going to take this thing that I just showed you, and I'm gonna actually cut that hand out. But first, I'm taking this thing. Because I like to keep things in all one space sometimes, I'm actually gonna stick this in my art journal. But before I do that, all right, I have some paint here that I had already mixed, this kind of bluey green stuff. So here's where you guys might think I'm totally weird. I'm gonna use my hands to paint this on, just because I can. So I'll tell you, the other day, back before we got stuck in our houses, I was having such a hard time getting started with that canvas that I showed you. And I'm not really sure why, but I was totally stuck. I didn't know how to get started. I was frustrated because, I don't know how to mix a skin tone color. I didn't have a skin tone color. I was feeling all perfectionistic about it. Like, oh my goodness, it's just not going to be good. And so my family was actually watching a movie, and I decided I was just going to go paint this silly canvas. For some reason, I decided I'm going to finger paint it. Sometimes I need to just get out of my head and stop worrying about being perfectionistic about stuff. And that's where art has been actually really helpful for me, is especially this kind of stuff. I'd actually, like, my art journal is basically like mixed media. There's not just like one medium in here. There's paper, and there's paint, and there's pen, and there's like a whole bunch of stuff. And it's a mess. And there's pages I don't like, but yeah, it's just, it helps me though remember that I don't need to come to God perfectly. I can come as I am. There's no performance needing to be made. Yeah, I can just come to him. And so for whatever reason, painting with my fingers helps me remember that. And I'm probably like totally over spiritualizing things, guys. But that's okay. That's all right. Okay. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this aside because it's now got wet paint on it. It's going to sit over there and start to dry, I hope. Okay. I'm actually going to cut this out and stick it inside. Because like I said, like I don't like papers just lying around. That's why I end up putting stuff inside that journal. That's totally just my preference. And you don't need to watch me cut this out, so I'm going to put you on pause. All right, I've got my hand cut out. I'm going to grab this thing again, and if the paint's still wet enough, it looks like it is, the paint's still wet enough, I'm just going to stick it right on top of that wet paint, and I might go back and glue down some edges later if it doesn't look like it wants to stick, but for now, since the paint's wet, it should act sort of like glue. Okay. So here's my hand. And because, like, I know I already said, you know, like that when God, it seems like when God's saying, you know, he's engraved us on the palms of his hands, it's not just our name, but because it would be really difficult to literally show, I don't know what that fully means. I am actually just going to take my red pen and I'm going to write my name in the center to remember, you know, it's not just that Jesus, I mean, he took the sins of the world on his shoulders. Like, he died for the sins of everybody who has lived and will live and is living, and but sometimes I can forget that it's very personal, you know? It's not just that, I don't feel like I'm saying this clearly, but that he died for you by name. He has engraved you, like you, specifically you, uniquely you, in his hands. So I'm going to just write my name there to symbolize that. I had a friend who challenged me to read through Mark, start reading through Mark this month, and I was reading about when Jesus was asked to come heal a synagogue ruler's daughter, and on the way there was that lady who was bleeding, who in the crowd, she pressed up as close to Jesus as she could to touch his cloak. And this is in chapter 5. And Jesus did not act like she was an interruption, right? And he sensed her touch individually. It didn't just get lost in the crowd, right? And he stopped and he looked around for her to see who had touched him. And it just, I don't know, it does something to my heart that Jesus stopped in the middle of going to go heal somebody's daughter in order to not just heal his daughter physically, but to me it sounded like emotionally. And he even, in verse 34, after he found out who touched him, he says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." And he calls her daughter, on the way to heal this other man's daughter. He calls this woman daughter, and make sure that he stops to address her needs, not just physical. She'd already been healed physically before he turned around and talked to her, but I think Jesus, he knew her specific individual need, and it just, anyway. So just thinking about that as I was thinking about how individually, Jesus died for us as well, how individually he engraves us on his hands. So I don't know what else I'll do with this page. I might just let it sit. I have to let it sit because it's still wet. But like I talked about, perhaps journaling around it. I might do that. I have a white pen somewhere that I think could go over this weird bluey green paint. I've got this other side that I haven't gessoed yet that I might journal on over there. So really super simple. You guys do not need an art journal. If you don't have something to use like that, you do not need one by any means. This could just go sit in a notebook, it could just be on a piece of paper. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need paint. You don't need chalk pastels. You could use colored pencils. You could use crayons. You could just use a pen. So I hope this is not like a how-to. The last thing I want to do is give you guys a how-to. It's just I hope this can be a jumping off point for you if you might be wired a little similarly to me to sometimes just need to get our hands messy and really delve into what God's doing in our hearts in a different way. Thanks for following along with me, guys. And I miss you. Really, really miss you. Miss seeing you. And I hope we can see each other again soon. Feel free to send me questions if you want to. Talk to you later.